Whether you are a combat pilot, an explorer, a miner, a hauler, or even an industrial shipbuilder, there are going to come times when you need to go from A to B, whether that's within the same system, whether that's across multiple systems, or even multiple regions. I would argue, therefore, that learning to navigate New Eden is probably the most important skill you can learn as a new pilot, and moreover, how to safely navigate New Eden as a new pilot. That's what we're going to be covering in today's video. I'm going to be showcasing everything you need to know to get from A to B nice and safely. Now, where you choose to go or what you choose to do when you're there, that's entirely up to you. Ahoy there, folks! I'm Captain Benzie, and welcome to another Catskull Academy lesson for EVE Online. Now, the first thing you're going to need to know as a prospective new pilot in New Eden is, of course, how to navigate within the system you are in. Chances are you already know how to undock from a station. You've got a basic understanding of how to move around within the fully 3D environment around you. That said, a lot of people don't necessarily know that there are multiple controls you can use on your current grid. Now, before we go any further, I suppose it's worth me just spending a moment to talk about what a grid actually is. Well, if you zoom yourself right the way out, this is your grid. This is where you can see things in the area around you, and I believe this stretches off to about 1,000 kilometers in every direction. So if someone arrives 1,000 kilometers away, they'll show up on my overview, they will show up on my screen, but anyone beyond that is essentially outside of my ship's scanners. And when we come out into the overview like this, you can also see things like the range of your weapons, the direction that you're traveling in via this line, and even the speed of that travel. If I turn on my micro warp drive, for example, here, you'll see that that blue line increases in its length to showcase that we are moving faster in that direction. Anyway, the overview is something that we'll talk about in future videos, both the actual overview of where you're going to be going and the full-on tactical overlay that you get when you zoom out. In today's lecture, then, we're just going to be having a look at how to, first of all, navigate within the system. And I think it's important to, first of all, just point out that, of course, you can right-click on things and hit orbit, you can approach, you can use keep away from. All of these are things that are covered in the tutorial. What the tutorial doesn't teach you is that there are manual controls that you can do as well. If I double-click a distance in space, you will turn your ship and start to move towards that point. And this can be very useful for approaching enemies whilst not at a direct angle to them. You can kind of skirt around and spiral in on them, keeping up your angular trajectory and velocity to make it harder for turrets to hit you. This is a really useful skill to learn, that sort of double click. You can do this literally directly behind you as well. Your ship's inertia plays an important part in calculating how fast that turn actually is, but notice that the graphics are not exactly accurate to the exact placement and direction of your ship. The game actually does calculate everything using sort of an invisible sphere at your ship's center. The rest of the graphics around it are just pretty set dressing. But anyway, so first of all, as I said, learning to double-click into space and sort of change the heading of your ship is a vital skill in and of itself. Don't always rely on approach and orbit and keep at range and things like that. Next up, we have manual controls in regards to our speed. We can actually click and change how fast our ship is moving at its top speed. And you might think, why would I want to travel at anything lower than my top speed? For a combat pilot, this is useful for controlling your actual velocity in regards to your own turrets, making sure that you're not moving too fast for your turrets to track an enemy ship. It also, for things like explorers, can be used to make sure you stay within range of things. Miners, especially strip mining later on, you might find that you don't want to go through a belt at full speed because you'll miss some of the resources. So you can click anywhere on this little speed dial and this will set your speed. There are more advanced ways of doing this as well, but for now, that's a good enough start, I think. You can also click the little minus symbol to just flat out stop your ship. Again, inertia does play a role in this and how long it takes to actually reach a near zero speed. Because of how EVE calculates speeds and velocities, you never really reach absolute zero. You're always just going at a tiny, tiny fraction. This is why it is technically possible to miss someone, even if they are stood perfectly in inverted commas still. We can also hit the plus button on this side to go to a full speed as well, giving you the full control there to quickly go up and down those different speeds. I do kind of miss Eve Echo's full-on circle grid thing that you can use for this, but I think ultimately this does the job quite nicely, and it allows you to set those speeds so that you can change your direction, change your heading, amongst other things. Now, of course, again, you can right-click on something in space, hit approach, and you will just drive in a straight line towards it. You can hit orbit, and you can change different defaults, or you can even change the range completely to orbit an object at a different radius. You can, obviously, if it's a station, you can just dock at it. There is often in combat as well a keep at distance, which means you will fly towards the target if you are further than that distance. You will fly away from the target if you are closer than that. So here I'm just going to set a 1000 meter orbit, and I'm going to hit my micro warp drive, remembering that obviously activating a micro warp drive does affect your inertia, therefore I turn slightly slower toward the end there. And you'll notice that when you set these kind of commands, you do get these rings, like here for an orbit, I get a blue ring showing my projected orbit traversal there. So we can see where I'm going to actually go and what that orbit should ultimately look like at the point where we maintain that orbit. Obviously, I've got to reach that line first of all, hence the micro warp drive, just to close that distance. It's not going to be 100% accurate for your first couple of swings, but you should eventually hit that radius with a bit of time and with your inertia kicking in as it does. But essentially, that's all we need to talk about in regards to navigating manually whilst in space, because most of the stuff you're going to do, especially early on in the game, is going to work pretty well with just approach, keep at range, and orbit. That will do most of the things that you need it to, but it is worth noting that you have that manual control to double-click off into space at any time. That will automatically break orbits, break keep at range, break approaches. The manual is a complete override for you there. Now, the second part of exploring within a current system, navigating within a current system, is of course using your overview. You can look up and down this list and you can see different points that you can navigate to. Now, ultimately, you can see I am nice and close to this particular station here, but what if I wanted to move to a different one within the same system? Well, I can just find a new one. Let's go, for example, here, Hec 2 Minmatar Mining Corporation. Now, you can just right-click on this and it'll bring up this contextual menu. I do also have it set up so my middle mouse wheel button brings up this contextual wheel, and this does all kinds of crazy stuff. Notably, we can go straight to dock, we've got warp to within, show info, align to, and the various different look at abilities there as well. Now, this is a really quick way for just getting around. This is faster than going with this menu here, I personally find, but again, it's worth playing around with and just getting a different feel for how you're going to do these things yourself. And I do sometimes misclick like that because I'm using a really cheap plastic mouse at the moment. One day I will re-upgrade that. But for the most part, that contextual menu is going to give you a nice amount of control over going from A to B nice and easily. You can also stop the ship, but not while you're warping. So I kind of hammer this, and that will now stop me from sort of docking at this station. I can, if I wanted to, for example, where was the sun gone? There it is at the top here, Hec Star. I can just go to align to, and this will just point me in the direction of, and ultimately that will start me moving towards it, just on a standard approach. Now, obviously that's a long distance, it's going to take a long time to manually get there, but I am moving now over 75% speed. I'm within 5 degrees of alignment, which means if I were to hit warp to, I'm going to pretty much instantly warp to that point. I'm just going to activate my warp drive instantly because I've already met the basic criteria of warping, which is basically facing within 5 degrees of the target destination, whilst also moving at least 75% of your maximum velocity. And there we are, we're now around the star. Finally then, I want to go back to the station that I was at before, and I need to remember which one it is. It should be the Boundless Creation facility there. I'm just going to hit dock, and again, my ship will now align to that new point and start to move towards it. So ultimately, your ship's alignment, when your ship is perfectly still, you are a point. When it changes alignment, you just immediately start accelerating towards that point. So alignment from 0 doesn't mean anything. Your ship doesn't actually have to turn. That's just a graphic. What I do have to do is achieve the 75% maximum velocity before we can warp. But here we are, I've warped to within 0, so docking is pretty much instantaneous. There are faster ways to dock, but we'll talk about that in a future bookmark video. Otherwise, here we are back at the station, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how to navigate across multiple star systems. Now, when it comes to navigating across different systems, whether that is a single system across or entire regions away, obviously there are lots of different ways to do this, and this is going to it's going to change based on where you want to go. And the first thing I suppose to really solidify is, where do you actually want to go? And there are a couple of reasons you might be wanting to travel around. So for example, you have been flying around in a ship and you want to go back and swap to one of the other ships you have in a distant station. This is quite a common thing. You may have bought something on the market a while ago and you want to go and pick that up from wherever you purchased it. How do you find this? Well, you're going to come to your Neocom here on the left-hand side, and we are going to go to Personal Assets. Click this, open it up, and it will bring a list of stations where you have items. And you can see I've got a lot of different items across New Eden in various different stations, and some of these are within the same system that I'm currently in. I'm here in Heck, but there are multiple things in the stations around this system that I've bought off the market. If, for example, I wanted to go to Jita because, I've left my hound there, for example, I can just right-click on Jita and then set as destination. And we'll get a full plan up here that shows exactly how far that is and what kind of systems we are going through. Here you can see it's going to go through a couple of low security systems before coming into the high security systems actually at Jita itself. And you can change these routes to go into a more, a more friendly route that keeps you going via HiSec if you want to. For me, I tend to go the just most direct route and make sure that I am paying attention. As long as you're paying attention, going through low sec is actually pretty secure. It's just a case of navigating correctly and making sure that you are doing things in the safest way possible, which I'll show you how to do in just a moment. But this is a nice and easy way to pick a destination of somewhere that you've already been. If I wanted to go to Tama for whatever godforsaken reason, I can right-click, set destination. Now you can also add waypoints. So if, for example, I wanted to go to one of these stations and I wanted to go via some of these to pick up a lot of stuff en route, I can go set destination, then add waypoint, add waypoint, add waypoint, and it'll calculate a route for me to go through. But on the subject of calculating routes, of course, we can also do this completely manually using the map. Again, come to the Neocom here on the left-hand side, we click on the map icon, and this will bring up a full 3-dimensional star map of the New Eden cluster. Now, not only is this thing just freaking beautiful to begin with, it has a lot of information on it, and it's worth spending a bit of time getting used to your controls here and sort of learning some of the routes and areas. Now, because I've got an autopilot route already set, you can see that it's mapping out that route and it's color-coded it based on the security of the systems that we are going through. Remember, the higher the number, starting at 1.0, dropping all the way down to 0, the higher the security rating. And once you hit 0 and start going into the minus numbers, that is nullsec, where no one and nothing is going to help you. And at this point in the game, I do recommend staying well clear of anything that drops to 0 security status or below. But along this route, you can see we've got a 0.3, a 0.3, a couple of 0.4s. That's not a big issue at all. But if you know a particular system you want to go to, for example, if you wanted to see the Eve Gate, but you haven't been there before, you can just type in New Eden into the search here. This will bring, once we hit enter, it'll search for a couple of new bits and pieces. Solar systems, New Eden, 28 jumps. We can now set destination. And again, you can now see, if I zoom out a little bit, that has plotted the route all the way out from Minmatar space, through a little bit of the Galentes things, down into Genesis, out all the way down here. There's a lot of quite scary systems on this route. Does go into very low sec. This tends to be camped a lot because it's one of those routes that people like to sort of travel along in order to see the Eve Gate itself here in New Eden. But again, it is low sec. You can be pretty safe if you are just careful about how you do things. So that's another way to find yourself a route through those systems. For now, though, I just want to showcase how to quickly move between these areas. So I'm going to go back to Personal Assets. I'm going to quickly reset my destination to Jita, and we are going to undock. And I'm going to show you how to move from system to system quite quickly and safely, as long as you're in high sec or low sec. Now, it's worth pointing out this is not 100% safe. There are safer ways of doing this, but we've got an autopilot set. First rule, never touch this button. The autopilot button in EVE Online is absolute death. If you click on this, it will warp you to your next gate. It will then slow boat you in from about 20 kilometers away, jump you to the next system where you warp to within 20 kilometers of the next gate, and so on and so forth. Not only is this a lot slower than doing it manually, it also puts you in a really dangerous position where you're 20 k's off gate. That is plenty of time for someone to lock onto you and blap you nice and quickly. So anyway, we have an autopilot set. You'll notice my overview, I've got a particular travel tab here, and in anything that is set as part of my autopilot route glows in yellow. It's also worth, if I just were to align to this quickly to show it on the actual screen here, there we are. It also appears as a yellow object actually in space as well, but trying to find that manually is going to just be awful every time. So keep an eye on your overview, find the thing that is yellow, and then hit jump. We don't need to warp to and then jump, we can just jump. Autopilot will drop you at 20 k's off the gate and then slow boat you in before jumping, but manually just hitting jump will take you in at 0 and then auto jump, as you'll see now. So here we are coming up to the auto gate. We drop right in to basically 0 meters, well, within 0 kilometers, and a second later, we're jumping through. Now, remember, when you jump a gate, you do get a brief bit of invulnerability on the other side. As I have now jumped the gate, I have a gate cloak. This means it is impossible for anyone to target me at this point in time. I'm fully cloaked. If there were anyone else around, I'm completely safe. And you can actually look up here. I can sometimes set this to combat. Here we are, we've got some hammerheads nearby, nothing overly crazy. Those look like they've just been abandoned by someone who warped without taking them with them. There are no enemy ships nearby, and we can zoom right the way out just to get a proper look to make certain of that if this were a particularly risky system. As it happens, we're pretty safe, so I can just kind of go straight and jump again. Keep an eye just to be sure that there's nothing dangerous around you, especially if you're on a ship with a slightly slower align time, but for the most part you should find if you're using frigates and destroyers, which early on in EVE, as you're learning navigation are pretty much the ships you're going to be using, you should find that this is more than sufficient to get you through those risky, in inverted commas, low-sec systems. Yes, if I'm in a hauler, things are going to be a little bit different, but that's another topic from another video. We're going to be talking about basic navigation today only, and you'll see that just doing this is more than sufficient for getting you from A to B nice and safely. Again, it's not 100% safe. If you do happen to have someone who is suicide ganking in a particular fit of catalyst, for example, yeah, they can probably lock you and grab you just before you warp, but it's difficult. Those are fairly rare these days when it comes to just navigating through space like this. So when you arrive in system, just check for enemy ships, then do that middle click, go straight to the jump, and off we go to the next gate, and we just move quickly A from B to C like this. And if we do need to, you can always change things around on here. We can set destinations, we can jump back using the other personal assets. Like if I decided now, actually, I've forgotten something, let's go back to heck, I'm going to set destination. Now here, if I had enemy ships here and I didn't want to continue on this route, for example, that could prove problematic, because if I just go jump, I've got to turn around and I've got 10 kilometers worth of space to do. That's going to take a while. People have a chance to lock onto you at this point, right? You can see how slow this is. Even in a frigate, to get within range of the jump, that's quite a bit of time. And even activating a micro warp drive, because of the inertia shift there, it takes a while to get up to maximum speed and actually get me within range to jump. So when this happens, the best thing to do is to kind of work out which key this is on. That is their Alt F2. So, for example, someone's just been blapped. In this example, if I wanted to move, you can it's kind of like the cloak trick. We can hit here, mouse over the jump, and then Alt and F2 at the same time. And we activate that micro warp drive and we get up to speed really, really quickly, because we are doing it as the cloak drops rather than dropping the cloak and then going. But there we are, you can see even playing around with that kind of thing, there were enemy hostile ships nearby there, but there's very little chance of them actually locking onto me and doing anything. Again, slower ships, different case in point, but for your frigates and your destroyers, you should be okay just moving from A to B like this. And I know that there are some EVE Online veterans watching this saying, you know, you shouldn't be teaching people this. I want to teach the basics first. In future videos where we talk about actually flying through nullsec and lowsec, I'll go over some of the more advanced tips and tricks of like how to scan gates, how to check on various different API-based websites that can help you plot a route and figure out if ships have been destroyed in that local area and thus if it's likely you'll encounter a gate camp. But for today, I just wanted to show the basic move from A to B to C and how to do that relatively quickly, relatively safely. Of course, if you do have any tips and tricks you'd like to let people know, drop it in the comment section down below. Have a look through, see what other people are suggesting for doing this kind of stuff as well. Otherwise, I hope that's been useful to you. If you do have questions, please ask in the comments. Come join me on the Cat Skull Discord. I'm more than happy to answer any questions I can and teach people as much about EVE Online as I can do. Otherwise, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way through to the end. Good luck and happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.